Thank you very much indeed, Klaus-Michael. It was a year ago at the last Zug Summit that we began to explore the possibility of the faiths setting up a proactive program on investment. And I'm delighted to ask my co-chair of what is now Faith Invest, a new organization, Jean-Pierre Schwertz, to join me as well. We symbolize both the joys and the difficulties of this alliance. I come from the religious side, so I know I'm okay. And he comes from the business side, and he's hoping he will be okay. So between us, we have a mission to help him, and he believes he has a mission to help us. Bless him, he'll soon learn otherwise. But it is it is a fascinating program that we're doing. The faiths are major investors. And I'm going to ask Jean-Pierre in a moment to start with our presentation here. But just to set it in context, the faiths are the oldest and most sustainable organizations in the world. We've outlived every dynasty, every empire, including the British, for which we are a little bit sorry. We're going to outlive all the institutions that exist at the moment. We've been around for the last couple of thousand years. We're going to be around for the next couple of thousand years. If you want sustainability, we're quite a good basis to start with. We don't move very fast. This is true. But when we do move, it is quite dramatic. Think of the Reformation. That had its impact. And I'm speaking here, of course, as a Protestant in the place where you killed Zwingli. So, we forgive you. He was quite an interesting character. So we know we can move. We also are the fourth largest investing group in the world. And we have a long tradition of what we're against. So, for example, Islam has been against usury, against the charging of interest, so it did kind of forget it for a couple of hundred years and had to be reminded. But is now this huge couple of $1 trillion program, an investment program. We have traditions that were against alcohol. Not very interested in them, but, bless them, they kept going. Then there are the peace churches, the churches that would have nothing to do with armaments. You have the Jains, who would do nothing, take nothing that would involve the taking of any life, animal, sentient beings, human, whatever. I'm an Anglican, member of the Church of England. I've always maintained that we have a very strong tradition of not doing anything useful. As long as we can make money, we don't really care. No, that is changing. That is changing, but we have had quite a long history of not doing a lot. So we were working with a world in which there was a huge variety of attitudes to what it meant to be faith-aligned or faith-consistent. But when the United Nations asked my organization, the Alliance of Religions and Conservation, if we would co-host with them a meeting with the major faiths about the SDGs, we said yes. And out of that came a series of papers from each of the major faiths, or from each major faith, saying what they were already doing. So it wasn't news to the faiths that you should focus on education or health. We've been doing that for the last 3,000 or 4,000 years, so it was lovely the UN joined us. But in other ways, there were areas, particularly gender, where it was news and where there were areas we needed to explore. Out of that came these commitments, and the UN noticed that within those commitments, some 9 out of the 24 faith groups from many, many different traditions said that they were thinking of moving their investments into social and environmental investing. And we did get this wonderful phone call one day from somebody in the UN who said, we just read this. Do the faiths have any money? To which we responded, yes, a little bit. And so this triggered then this whole program, which came here to Zug, thanks to Klaus-Michael's invitation, and we brought our first meeting of major faiths, 8 major faiths from all around the world, to talk about how we could move forward, each of us with our own guidelines, our own traditions, but together we would be stronger and move from negative screening to positive. I'm going to ask Jean-Pierre to take us through that element.
Thank you very much, Martin. I met Martin for the first time in 2001, I think, Martin, it was, in New York, when Martin already was trying to get faith organizations into faith-consistent investing. And you've been on a long journey with that, about 17 years now, and more faith organizations are now behind you. I think that I'm coming just from the financing and investing world, and together we try to bridge that gap between the faith organizations and the investing world. Moving beyond negative screening, many faith organizations, of course, do negative screening already with their investments. But there are not so many who are very actively are investing in areas that have, let's say, a positive goal, who are going into impact investment. However, we see that they like to do that more and more. However, they often don't know so well how to do that. And that is what Faith Invest tried to assist these faith organizations with, to do that. However, not in a naive way. Of course, in line with the trustees' obligations. That is simple. That is also a guideline for us. What we do is based on 4 pillars. And Martin, maybe you can say a few things about the 4 pillars.
I can, if I can work out how to use this machine. Oh, no, I've just turned the entire thing. Oh, no, I've turned the thing. Could somebody do this for me? Technology, as my colleagues will tell you, is not my forte. Yes, vision and wisdom, but not control of that thing. Thank you very much indeed. This does not come as a surprise to any of my colleagues at all. Usually if I do something, it comes in back to front and upside down and then dies. So what we bring, I think, is something quite... Okay, Jean-Pierre, you're in charge. See, this is the sharing of skills. I'll pray for him and he'll make the machines work. So what we bring to this is something slightly different from the usual. We bring vision and wisdom. We bring the wisdom of the fact that every major religion today emerged out of a previous ecological and social collapse. We've been through this before. We do love to think that nobody's ever been in such awful mess as we are now. Well, I'm sorry to tell you that actually we have. Maybe not on quite the scale and affecting quite so many people, but of course there weren't so many people around at the time of the Black Death or the Yellow Plague in the 6th century. But out of these disasters, the faiths had to reconstruct meaning, had to reconstruct a story of who we are and what our relationship is with the rest of life on earth, creation, evolution, nature, call it what you care, it doesn't matter. The point is we have to have a story that gives us some sense of where we are and our place. And the wisdom of the faiths is that we don't just think about us as human beings. Every single faith has an understanding of what is the meaning of the rest of life on earth and beyond. So we have that. We also have the vision. We do not believe that everything is dreadful. We do believe that there are forces, spiritual forces, forces within ourselves that we can call upon that can make a change. We are hopeful. That is fundamental. But we also have a mission. Every major faith, and the faiths that have so far created their guidelines, set out for us their mission. And every one of them has a vision for creating a better world in very, very different ways, for very different purposes and reasons. But we all are mission-driven. That's why we're here. That's why we have the number of members we have. It doesn't happen by inertia that you end up with 2.4 billion Christians, or 1.6 billion Muslims, or 800 million Hindus. It doesn't happen by accident. It happens because we have a vision and we have a mission. And of course we have a strategy. Now, one of the great mistakes that people make when they think about working with religion is they all want the Pope, the Dalai Lama, a Swami, a reincarnated deity, and someone who's a good friend with the Muslims to come. And that's fine, that's lovely, but frankly, they know absolutely nothing about how to run a religion. If they were left alone, religion would probably die within a generation. What they rely upon is the fact that if you're dealing with education, and the faiths run over 50% of all schools worldwide, you work with the people who manage the curriculum and the teacher training within a faith for those schools. So if you take Kenya, the Catholic Church runs, I think, something like 7,000 or 8,000 schools. So you don't go and talk to the cardinal, you go and talk to the people who run the schools. The same is true with finance. So what we've brought together are the finance people, the people who actually know where the money is, or thought they knew where the money was, hope they know where the money is, and we begin to work with them. And at a certain level, it's rather like sort of bringing people out from the basement, because most religions are slightly embarrassed about the fact that they actually do make money from the commercial world, and so they kind of keep the finance people buried deep down, you know, let them out too much into the sunlight in case they blab. We bring them out into the sunlight and say, come on, let's celebrate. So that's the 3 elements.
Thank you. From these 3 elements, we looked what are the services that the faith organizations really need. So we engaged with many of them in the last year, 1.5 years, and asked, how can we promote, how can we assist you in faith-consistent investing? And 4 pillars, 4 kind of services boiled down from that. We thought there's a need for a network for identifying and creating faith-aligned investment opportunities across asset classes. And that network we already see in the events that Martin organized in the last years are very, very effective. We see there is a need for education of the people in charge for asset management in many of the faith organizations. Of course, there are also many who are very professional, but there are also many who can use a little bit of education, and also some research for that is needed. Then we also saw there's a big need for a platform for, let's say, projects, local projects that have to be developed, companies that have to nurture it a bit, that they can go to a stage where you can invest in them. So let's say a project development fund for that. And we see that need with many faith organizations. That is the third need that we saw, the third pillar on which Faith Invest is based. And then, of course, the voice. A voice for Faith Invest and value-driven investment within the philanthropies and links with the other interest group. We also link, of course, the Faith Invest, the faith organizations with the asset managers in the world, because there is a tremendous knowledge and expertise with the asset managers, and many of them are here also. You have a lot of expertise in the Swiss organizations, and to link those organizations in the right way with the faith groups. Martin.
Thank you. So what are our services? Faith Invest is in the process of coming into being. We are co-chairs, and Faith Invest held its development committee yesterday, and I can now announce to you that Faith Invest is coming into being. It will be a fully legal, functioning body by January the 1st of next year, God willing, or probably even not God willing. We're going to make it happen. It's going to happen. And we've had to decide, what are we going to be? And we are going to be a membership organization, and membership will be dependent upon faith groups creating their guidelines, giving us the information of why do they believe in what they believe in, what does this mean, how do they manage their assets, what is their decision-making process, what is their negative screening, and therefore, what is it they want to be involved in to change the world, to make it a better place, to invest in transforming it. And so the networking is hugely important. It's not just the faith members. We're also looking at associate members, particularly the philanthropy world, which is looking at us and saying, gosh, if you can do that as faiths with the diversity and create a sense of diverse approaches, but a common purpose, maybe we can do the same, and we're looking with about 40 different philanthropists who want to be members, but also convening with, as Jean-Pierre said, the asset managers. We've got a whole program with universities. I made a huge error this morning. I said I thought there were 600 faith-based universities in the world. I was swiftly corrected. There are probably about 8,000 or 9,000 faith-based universities in the world, and we have a program to link the universities that have schools of theology, religion, philosophy, etc., and business schools together, so that there would actually be a curriculum on faith-aligned and value-driven investing that would be simply a part. If you go to a faith-based university like Georgetown, you would be undertaking that in your business studies, a huge area of awareness, and that will be part of the networking. Education. The faith commitments that we've got, which are fantastic and incredibly powerful, and already we're talking in terms of about $3.5 trillion worth of religious and philanthropic investment that is making commitments that they want to move this. Some of it is talking only about impact investing, 5 to 10%. Others, like the Church of Sweden, is saying we want to move our entire portfolio, 9 trillion, into faith-aligned investing. So not just bits of it, but the whole thing. Tremendously exciting. But also, one of the things is that the social profile of investors Believe it or not, you horrible pagan lot, you're the most religious group there is. The relationship between belonging to a faith and using your money well as individuals is higher than in the general public. So you, as faithful members of faiths where you are, when you are, we're also speaking to you, and that's part of the education. So if I take a wonderful program by my dear friend Christoph Struckelberger from Geneva, he has over 130 religious entrepreneur groups around the world. These are entrepreneurs who have identified themselves as faithful people who are saying, blimey, I've got this money, what do I do to be faith-aligned, faith-consistent with the teachings of my faith? So we have a huge additional market. Beyond the institutional faiths, we have the faithful who are business people, who run philanthropies and so forth. It is an ever-increasing circle, and the education is part of that. The platform, now this is really fascinating. One of the things that we encountered right early on was everyone was saying to us, well, it's marvelous, get all these people interested, but there aren't enough investable projects. Now here, you have the joy of essentially a kind of marketplace of the best of the best. And I have to say, Helmut and Christian, thank you very much for mentioning religion for a start, but also, look at the kind of things that are coming forward. But we know that they're scarce. We know they're difficult to bring to market. So we decided we would work with the UNDP and also with the Scottish Government, both of whom were concerned, to enable projects from the ground, small projects that have been grant-funded maybe for 20 years by UNDP through the Equator Principles, projects that are coming out through the faiths, where we've been supporting through grant projects, programs on the ground, for example, in agriculture and so forth. How can we bring those to a point at which the thinking shifts from assuming it can only be done with grants to thinking that it could be something that could be invested in and could make a return? So we are going to be launching a whole distance learning program for training people on the ground on how to think entrepreneurially or how to develop business plans. This is in response to a request, particularly from Cardinal Turkson at the Vatican, who wants every single diocese to have teams of people who've actually thought through how do we become investable. So we are developing that. We're developing a due diligence program. We're then bringing these projects to a point at which we can assess them, and then we will bring them to the marketplace, which will be, for us, the faith investors and the philanthropies, and make it more generally open. Because we know that without creating a pipeline, we're going to have a demand, but there will not be enough for it to pick up on. So we're very excited about that, particularly the partnership with the Scottish Government and UNDP. And then finally, the voice, advocacy. One of the things that we are looking at is that the traditional language of investment and of ethical investment and impact investment is almost irreducibly linked to the Judeo-Christian Islamic worldview. So to take a very simple example, a lot of you, if you're talking to us who are religious, will say, well, of course, you're all about stewardship, aren't you? No. For about half of the world, stewardship makes no sense at all, because that assumes that somehow we are apart from nature. Many faiths view us as being part of nature, caught up in the cycle of life, and that therefore the word that they would use would be that we are servants of, we are participants of, we are at the service of the rest of life, not that the rest of life is at the service of us to be managed. So part of this voice is actually asking you to think, is the language you use itself a problem? And one of the main things, and I come mostly from the conservation environment world, is that we often talk as though there's a thing called nature and then there's a thing called us. We put ourselves apart from. What we have to do, and what this is about, is putting us back, making us a part of, not apart from.
Very good. Where has Faith Invest come from? As I mentioned, in 2001, Martin Arken organized with ARC, the Alliance of Religious Conservation, a first event in New York. And for me, that was the first time I met you, Martin, and it was a highly inspirational event because here were the faith leaders, and here were the investment managers, the asset managers, the private wealth managers. And it was a great mix of people there together. And one of the things that came out of that was the Anglican Church. We made a proposal for the Anglican Church, how they could invest in a sustainable way for their full portfolio. We didn't hear about it for about 6 years, I think, and then they called you, hey, we've done it. Which was pretty bad for me because I was from Rabobank, and I thought, hey, that's business for Rabobank, no way. But we were very happy that it turned out. So slowly from that first event, it developed to where we are now. And maybe, Martin, you can tell a little bit about that journey.
Yes, indeed. Our founder is Prince Philip, who I've been his religious advisor for 33 years, which has occasionally been a little bit like being etiquette advisor to Attila the Hun. But the food, the dinners are very good. I have to say, the dinners are very good. They're great fun. So, but Prince Philip has been a wonderful mate with us. He helped found ARC. He's been the person who he does occasionally sort of say, "I gather I've got a deep interest in Parsi and Jain investment policies." And I go, "Yes." He said, "Oh, okay." Because I have taken his name in vain, but he has been one of our strongest supporters. And with Ban Ki-moon, we launched in 2009 with the UN a whole series which eventually ended up with over 80 long-term plans by the faiths. The great skill of the faiths is we think long-term. Don't ask faiths to do an 18-month campaign. We're not good at that. We are good at the long haul. We do invest for 25 years and plus. We do plan for the long term. I'm an Anglican. We took 75 years to rewrite our prayer book, which was last revised in 1662. This one is not going to be revised for at least another 150 years because we couldn't stand the strain. But it means that the imagery we've built into that book is what will shape how we think. And that's fundamental. So we developed these long-term plans, and that led to the launch in Windsor Castle with Ban Ki-moon, if we can press again.
Sure.
And then we also launched the Sacred Cities program. Pilgrimage has risen in every single major religion in the last 20 years by over 200%. This is placing a huge strain on the cities. And we have with us, to our delight, our friend Yasin from Kano. He's the rather dubious-looking character in the middle in white. And you can see a couple of other fairly dubious-looking characters. So we developed a program which was looking at how can we help cities and the major faiths in cities develop programs for infrastructure around waste. Give you an example. One of the biggest pilgrimages in India is to the city of Puri, and at the end of that, there are over 6 million single flip-flops left behind because somebody's trodden on your flip-flop and it's gone. And so what do you do with that? They used to waste them. Now it's used for making for road fill. So how do you deal with waste? How do you deal with food? How do you deal with energy? How do you deal with transport? How do you deal with water? And so one of the programs we're doing, and Kano is a great example, is helping the cities to rethink how they manage this huge increase in pilgrims. And then we hosted in 2015 with the UN. We were asked if we would bring the major faiths together with the UN about the SDGs. I have to be honest, the UN then said to us, "Oh, really sorry, we forgot to consult with you in the beginning." I don't think that's going to happen again because the faiths are now back at the table. We are back at the table. We're not going to run the table, but we're back at the table. We're back, and we intend to be with you as partners in the long run. This very dubious-looking character at the beginning, at the top here, led a pilgrimage, which Helmut referred to, through the streets of Zug. It was huge fun. We had very noisy band at the beginning. We tromped all the way up in here. There was a slight look of surprise on some of the faces of people here, but it was to celebrate. One of the great things we know as faiths is that nobody reads a conference paper after it's been presented. Ever. Unless you're very, very bored or very sad. But you do remember the fact that a whole bunch of very colorful people with banners and lots of loud music tromped through your city. Or you do remember that poets wrote poems about what they saw, or that new music was created, or that drama took place. We are a narrative species, for God's sake. Why are numbers called numbers? Because they numb us. You hear them. They go 75%, 40%. Sing a song. We also have a thing in ARC that we do not use a word unless it's being used in a poem, because if it's not being used in a poem, nobody loves it. I cannot tell you the number of appallingly bad attempts at poems with biodiversity, ecosystem deliverables, I just can't tell you. So let's liberate ourselves to celebrate. We're also very bad at celebrating. We're very good at telling people how bad they are, and you usually think that's what religions do. No, for goodness sake, we party. Yes, we fast. We have Eid. We have Lent and we have Advent. But my God, look at Eid al-Fitr, look at Easter, look at Christmas. We know how to celebrate in order to remind us of what we might be losing. And that's part of what this is about. And now we are moving on this path, slightly wobbly, not quite sure where it's going, but Faith Invest, I am delighted, ladies and gentlemen, to tell you, is coming into being, and that is largely due to the wonderful friendship with Klaus Michael and to the support we receive from so many of you, and we invite you to join us as fellow pilgrims on the road to somewhere. Thank you.